Welcome to this episode of Freemix, episode number 6. Hopefully this advice is mad nice and not hard to swallow like Pumpernick. And if you don't like it, you can... So here we are in a song called Boogaloo, sent to us by Steve Murphy, who is in Form and Flow and also in The Free Producer. And this is the first time that I have actually received an Ableton project from somebody that worked. Part of that is because I'm on Ableton 11, not on Ableton 12, so all Ableton projects are backward compatible but not forward compatible. So I'm excited that this one is working. However, there are a couple things that are not working because I don't have complete control. And I'm also not entirely sure if that's free. It could be free, I'm not sure. And then ROM, I don't even know what that one is. I've never heard of that one before. So I am going to not worry too much about these. And then I do have Ulean, but it's not in the VST folder I'm using currently. So just for future reference, if anybody is submitting Ableton projects and they have specific VSTs on them, the best thing to do is to highlight that track, right click it, and then go freeze track right here. Freeze track right here. And what that does is it will read the file and basically commit all of this stuff down here, this signal, to an audio file, so that somebody else who opens this project can still hear the audio of this file even if they don't have this VST down here. Oh, I think I think Ableton's gonna crash because it's not sure what to do. Okay. Yeah, I shouldn't have done that. But then after you do that, you can also flatten it, which will literally commit it to audio. So it'll get rid of all of the processing, all of the VST. You can't change any of that in the future, but what you're left with is just a discrete audio file. So there's freeze, which leaves all this available to you in the future. And then there's flatten, which makes it completely unavailable. Flatten will make it completely, will make it an audio file. So my usual first step is to organize the file or organize the project, but it looks like Steve has already done a lot of that. I mean, this thing looks pretty similar to the way that I would organize it. The one thing I want to do, I'm going to select everything, and then I'm going to go down here where it says the number of clips, and then I can rename it, and I'm going to delete just the names out of all of these clips. So now you can see, here, let me do it one more time so you can actually see what's happening. See how each one of these this clip has a title, and they're all the same title. So if I select everything, I rename, just delete the name, boom. All right, that's what I like. I'm gonna drag this out. And then something else that I like, that I do a lot of, or sometimes I do it, and another thing that I like that I do sometimes is this kind of thing where there's some blank space at the start. So, you know, if we were to delete all of this, Control-Shift-X to delete time, if we were to delete all of that, and then we decided this is too abrupt to start on, it can be a good idea to Control-I, insert time. It can be a good idea to put some leader space right here so that you could have some kind of intro or something. Don't need to put my headset on. Put you down here. So what I'm gonna have to do for it'll tell you right here, track bass. Can't find complete control. Same with track piano idea. Same with trumpet solo, and then master. So all of those, which were bass and piano idea. Well, actually, you know what? Instead of deleting those, I'm going to just use my own VSTs. And then trumpet solo was the last one. Yeah, okay. So for each of those, I'm just going to delete whatever the VST is. Okay, so it looks like, whoops. It looks like ROM is a reverb plugin. So anywhere that we saw ROM, we So anywhere that we saw ROM, we just want to put some kind of reverb. But, you know, I'm going to do reverb anyway, so that'll be okay. Now I can move this down here. And all right, so I am going to go ahead and listen to this track and make some notes. I'm going to need to give this a piano. So let's do, we're still in October, so we're going to do Surge for any of these that need one. So let me go find a keys, maybe. All right, let's try these, try something out. Okay, so by the way, okay, sweet. By the way, um, that was a track by Steve Murphy as well. He goes by the name SJVM on Spotify, and that was called "Still Up for It," I think, right? Yeah, that one was called "Still Up for It." Here's Boogaloo, which is the one that we're working on right now. Okay, so we have a little bit of an idea of what we're looking for, um, just without those couple of VSTs that Steve has, but that I don't have downloaded. So I'm going to do my best. Maybe not trying to match it specifically, because that might be a pretty difficult effort, but yeah, I'm just gonna kind of replace the piano here, the bass, and then I think the other one was there's 12 MIDI, which I'm not sure what that one is, and then or was that? I think that was actually the trumpet. That was the trumpet lead, but we might need to use like a synth or something like that. I'm not currently paying for East-West, but I really like the East-West orchestral VST. But I just don't have it right now. If I was using it, if I was paying for it, then I would use that for the piano, for the bass, for the trumpets, and I think it would sound really awesome. But unfortunately, we don't have that at our disposal today, so we're just going to try and wing it. So. That one. So here's what I picked. Actually, I think what I'm going to do is consolidate all this. That's Control J, so that I can actually double this so that the top part, basically everything above, oh, okay, so you can see Steve actually has everything playing, but at certain parts he's got those notes deactivated, and on Ableton you can do that with numpad 0. So that's interesting. That's really cool. But anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave. So I've got this duplicated now. I've got piano idea, track 1 up here, and then track 2 down here. So for the top one, that is going to be everything in the upper register, and then the bottom one is going to be everything in the lower register. So let's delete that, and these are deactivated. I think I got that right. We'll leave all that stuff because I'm not sure about it, but delete that. So basically we're going to have a bass part down here, and then we're going to have the upper part up here. Okay. For whatever reason on Surge, these presets seem really quiet. I don't know why that is, but there are a lot of them that are turned up all the way and you still can't hear it. Alright, so I'm going to use this for the bass piano. Make sure you can hear that. Then I'm going to use this for the upper piano, the upper line. Make sure you can hear that. Okay, and then we need to find something for the bass. Let me turn these back down where Steve had them. Okay, and then we need something for the bass. So let's grab a Surge preset. We can find basses. I kind of like that, gliding around. But let's keep shopping. I think that sounds good, like a square wave with a low pass filter on it. And the last one we needed was the trumpet lead, I believe. Let's listen to all these together. And we might have to, I don't know that we're going to find a trumpet patch here, so we might need to go with like a synth lead. I don't think that's what we're going for, but it's kind of sick. Alright, I like that one, but for some reason it's like clipping. I don't know, Surge doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me sometimes, but I'm just going to turn the global volume down on Surge. So this is going to go down -12. So it's no longer clipping, but it's way too quiet, right? So instead of turning it up in the VST where it's clipping, we're going to just make sure it's at a fine volume once it comes out of the VST, and then we can bump it up. But something's happening inside the VST where if we try to push it, it's like hitting an upper limit. It's like there's some limiting or some compression going on that is impacting our sound. So we dropped it inside of Surge by about -14. Let's just do like a nice even -12. And so then here on utility, right here I'm going to do a +12. And that's called gain staging. So basically we're just making sure that it's not clipping when it's coming out of the VST, making sure that's a good volume. And then after it comes out of the VST, after we do some processing and stuff, then we're just going to bump it up 12, and let's see how this sounds. We're going to add a limiter here. right, so now the notes are starting to spill over onto each other, which could be fine, but we can hear that it's causing some clipping. So like one note playing by itself is an okay volume, but once we start adding, you know, we have like 7 different notes that are ringing out all at the same time, that's when it starts clipping, and we don't like that. So we are going to lower the release or the sustain, one of the two. Or we're just going to affect the ADSR, attack, decay, sustain, release, somehow. But I don't know exactly how to do that right now. So I'm going to figure it out right now. That was this part. Actually, you know what? I think what we need to do is... Oh, you know what's happening? We're pushing this too hard because it doesn't sound loud enough, right? So we are trying to get it up like plus 12 here, but then it's getting too loud, so we need to add a limiter to it. The main issue that's happening is just that the channel volume is low enough that we can't hear it, right? It's not so much that this pad, or sorry, this patch, this preset actually needs to be louder. It's actually just that the channel volume is not loud enough. So we are actually going to even drop this a little bit. So let's do like a -6. And it's still clipping. Got it. Okay, so it did help when I turned the soft shaper off. So we just want to make sure. So honestly, I think I'm going to delete the soft shaper because I think that's what's causing that distortion. Like, shapers are cool when you want to add some high end, but I think it could just be that this surge preset that I put on doesn't really need it, so I think that's what we're looking for. Alright, and now everything should be good to go. So I'm going to listen to this. I'm going to listen to this. You guys are not going to hear this until we're done with the mix so that I can do the before and after. But first I need to bounce this out so that we have something to compare it to later. Did you guys see that Chiefs game? Wow. I mean, just wow. Okay, so now that I bounce this out, I can go to the spot where I put it. I can drag this back into the project, which should actually starts right there, starts right there. And then I'm going to disable this track right here so that we can't hear it normally. But if we do want to hear it, we just solo it. Okay? So this track exists in the project so that we can reference it at any point, but we're normally not going to hear it unless we actually choose to solo it. Okay? And this is a good way to be able to A/B what we're doing. So if we're changing something and we're like, what did it sound like even before? We can go here, we can solo this, and then we can remember what it was like. So the idea is we want to be able to listen to this, solo it, and then when we unsolo it, we should like what we're hearing better than when we solo it, right? Or else we're not making improvements. By the way, that freezing feature that I mentioned earlier, you can do this on multiple tracks at once. If you select them all and then go to... Oh, no, maybe you can't. Alright, I lied. I guess you can only do one at a time. But the idea... No, you can freeze tracks. Why? Is there a group? So you'll notice when I play something up here, right up here, this is your processor. Okay, so if your machine, if your computer is having a hard time handling all this, one thing that'll really help is if you can freeze some of these tracks, and what'll help even more is if you can flatten them. However, going from freezing to flattening requires a lot of commitment, so you need to be sure that you like the way it's at. You need to be sure you like where it's at before you freeze and flatten, because you're not going to be able to go back to having all of these parameters to adjust. But the upside is that it saves your CPU some power, so you can, once you freeze and flatten all of these, then maybe you could have like 4 times as many tracks if you wanted to. So there's a trade-off. way, while we're talking about CPU and your processing power, audio is more intensive than MIDI if you have nothing on the MIDI track. But once you start adding VSTs to the MIDI track, then the MIDI becomes more intensive than audio, right? So if you have just an audio track, that actually has a lot of data, and you have just like notes on your piano roll, that's basically nothing. But once you add some kind of VST to interpret the MIDI notes, that's when you start seeing spikes in your CPU, because it actually has to calculate the sound on the fly, right? Which is not true with an audio file. So again, MIDI notes, basically no data, no processing power until you add a MIDI instrument. So it goes piano notes on the piano roll, basically nothing, and then it goes audio as far as yeah, you get what I'm saying. So what I'm going to do in order to mix this is the organization is already done. I listened. I made a few mental notes, but basically what I want to do is kind of do this on the fly. So I'm not really going to group things together. We do have a guitar group right here. By the way, earlier I was wondering why I couldn't select all of these and choose freeze, and that's because you can't freeze a group. So this, you're not going to be able to freeze, but each of these individually you would be able to. So if you selected everything besides that group, then you could freeze multiple at a time. So what I'm going to do is mute everything, and then I'm going to bring things in based on how often they happen. So like for instance, this splash only happens at the start and it only happens at the end. So I am going to work on that last. These piano parts up here, they play throughout the entire song. So I need to make sure that they are sitting well before we start adding other things. Okay, let's do it. So first is actually this bass piano right here. And by the way, if we check the busiest part of the track, alright, so we check the busiest part of the track and we are already at 0 here. I mean, RMS is about -12, but peak is at 0. We want RMS to maybe be at like -24 and then peak at -12 right here. So what I'm going to do, this is super simple. I'm going to play this again. And then from here, I'm going to select everything. And if I start adjusting this, it's going to adjust everything by the same amount. Okay? So wherever we were, we're going to start adjusting this so that it peaks at about -12, maybe -6 right here. But really, yeah, really, we just want to have that headroom. So here we are. By the way, don't adjust your master volume right here. Just never touch this. Bad things happen. So now that I've got everything selected and I start dragging one of these over here, you can see now we're at peaking at about -12 RMS, which is root mean square. It's mathematical stuff. RMS is basically the average of your waveform, and then peak is what it's actually hitting when it peaks on those really big jumps. That's peak. But the average of everything over time, over like a second or some milliseconds, that's called RMS, and that's really what you're looking for. and that's this light green bar here, and then the dark green, that is your peak. Alright, so now we've got everything turned down, and it's too quiet for me to hear, so this is the secondary part. I need to turn my system up. So if I was listening on speakers, I would turn the volume up on the speakers so that I can hear it after turning everything down in my DAW. Since I'm listening on my headset, I'm turning the volume up on my headset so that I can hear it even though it's at a quieter volume in my DAW. Okay, this is really important. We want to make sure that everything is really, I don't want to say quiet, but like -12, that's not really loud. We want to make sure it's somewhere around there before it comes out of the DAW. And then after it comes out of the DAW, we can take it from like this up to here, right? We just normalize it. So, I don't think I did the thumbnail. Welcome to Freemix 6. 6. Okay. Anyway, so now that we've got this everything turned down and we're hitting about -12. Yes. Okay. So now let's collapse everything again. Let's mute everything except for, let's just do this bass piano. Okay, so this is about, let's see. Alright, so when the song starts, the bass piano comes in and the bass instrument comes in, the bass guitar. So these two are going to dictate how loud people turn their volume up, right? So, and Steve, since I'm not using the same preset that you're using, I'm just going to go ahead and delete this automation. It looks like you worked really hard on it, so I'm sorry. But since I'm not using the same preset, I feel like the automation is not going to match anymore. So, and that'll also give me the opportunity to adjust this freely without enabling the automation later. So, yeah, okay, so when the listener starts this song, these two instruments are probably going to be the two main ones that clue them in as to how loud they need to turn their volume up. And if it's mixed well, it's going to match the volume of this track is going to already match some other music that they've already been listening to. So they listen to something else, a commercial release, they turn the volume up to a certain point or down to a certain point, and if this track is mixed and mastered well, then when they play this track, they won't have to do anything to the volume, right? That's the big thing. That's the big thing with mixing and mastering, is that mastering mainly, is that we don't want people, mixing also, we don't want people to go through the track and have to keep their hand on the volume knob because things get too loud or things get too quiet, right? We want it to play all the way through and they don't have to touch the volume. That's a good user experience, and that's what we're going for. So anyway, these two guys are going to clue those pieces in as well as these two. So we're going to start with these 4 tracks or 5 tracks. This guitar is actually two guitars. So the bass piano, let's rename this bass piano and then bass. Okay, so you can't hear that, which means this guy needs to come up to about there. I'm gonna collapse these guys. By the way, I could group all these and then A-B it. I'll group them and then turn the entire group off. Oh, that's interesting. So it sounds like Steve's got a dedicated bass, which we knew that already. He's got this bass here, and then it sounds like he's cutting all the low end out of this piano. So I'm going to leave it, because I'm really trying not to just like wipe away everything Steve has done. I'm trying to take what he's done and go further with it. So we've got this thing. This is what it sounds like coming out of Surge. And then after that, we've got an EQ that's pulling the everything below roughly 420. And then we've got a top spreader. What is this, an auto panner or an auto filter? I think this is an auto filter, right? Yeah, it is an auto filter. I never use auto filter, so I hardly even recognized it. But we got that guy going. And we've got an LFO on here. Basically, it sounds like it's just boosting this frequency right here. So it seems like it's doing about the same thing as this. So I'm going to leave that guy alone. And then we've got a compressor. Which is adding kind of that studio sound. You can hear it's taking the peaks out. So here it is regular. Here it is with the compressor. So basically the spikes in the waveform are just being brought down a little bit, which is a nicer sound for your ears. More reliable. One thing I'm noticing though is that this compressor never gets a break, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but if you start adding a compressor and you hear that it's sounding squashed, it sounds like it's losing a bunch of dynamics, check this gain reduction and see if maybe this compressor is never getting a break, because that's usually where that comes from. I'm not hearing it right now, so I'm not really going to worry about it. But you notice this orange bar right here is how much gain is being taken out of this audio file. And you see it never goes away. So again, not a bad thing, because I'm not hearing anything, so in general, it's not a bad thing for the compressor to never get a break. But if you are hearing like, wow, that's sounding really, really squashed, check that, and could be why that's happening. Again, I'm not hearing it mess up the audio quality, so I'm not going to worry about it, but that's something to watch for. Something else I'll say. Something else that I like about what I'm seeing here is that Steve is using panning very sparingly, which I think is a great idea. It's way better to do too little of it than too much. So like some people might pan this all the way left. But Steve has just got it at about 32% left. And then this bass is panned to the left. I personally would probably put this in the center. I think that's a good rule of thumb. Not every rule of thumb you should adhere to all the time, but keeping bass in the center, I think, is one that is good to adhere to most of the time. So I'm going to put that back at 0 or center. And let's bring this actual bass in. I think actually let's listen to some more of this track. Nice 2-5-1 there. So yeah, let's bring the bass in. And again, this is here at the start of the track. So these 4 elements are going to dictate how loud the listener turns the song up. Let's listen to this bass. We've got, let me group all this together. So that's Control G, by the way. So if I turn this off, oh dude, that's interesting. Can you hear that? This is the bass patch that we're using. I would not have guessed that, but with Steve's effects on here and processing, it's just a low pass. It's like a square, I think, with the low pass filter. So it almost just sounds like a sine wave. If we find that we're having a hard time picking this out, once we bring everything else in, part of it could be that we're just missing all of this high end up here. So one thing that I think trips a lot of people up is you hear about remove all of the frequencies that are unnecessary, right? So with a bass, a lot of times people think, well, I should just remove all of the high end. Or like with a trumpet, people would think, I should just remove all of the low end. But sometimes what that has the effect of doing is it starts pulling way too much out of everything, and even when you add everything back together, it's not a very full sound. I'm not saying that that's what's happening here. This does sound like a very full track, but if you get caught up in removing too many of these frequencies because you're looking for a clean mix, sometimes what happens when you bring everything back in is it's not very full because you've removed all of the high end from the bass. You've removed all of the low end from the trumpet. And I think the thought is that you want each thing sitting next to each other. So like the bass takes up this frequency spectrum. The piano takes up from here to here. The synth takes up from here to here. And then finally, the hi-hat takes up from here to here. When really what you want is kind of things like stacked on top of each other and like overlapping each other a little bit. So all that to say is, if we get to the end and we realize, like, I can't really hear that bass as much as I would like to, part of that could be this this low pass filter right here. So it might be good to have it like right here. And again, it's going to sound different soloed than it will in the mix. So we got to keep going back and revisiting these things to say, you know, now that everything is in, I think this actually needs some more high end. It sounded good by itself, but now that everything is stacked on top of each other, I'm finding out that it sounds different than I thought it was going to. So we're going to put it back where it was. This is a good chord progression, by the way. All right, let's bring the piano or guitar in. So there's two guitar parts. This is called counterpoint, by the way. This is basically like the epitome of the last, like 300 years of music, Western music. So the idea is we've got one melody here that's doing bum 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 bum, but we have a second melody that's going ding, ding ding ding, ding ding ding, right? So we have two melodies playing at the same time. And I didn't mention that for any reason, but yeah, that's a cool thing that makes it more interesting for your ear. And so far, I'm not seeing any difference between these two guitar parts, so I want to hear them both at the same time. Okay, so I think he's doubling this. Yeah, this one is what is this, tension? I think this is a tension plug-in. Yep, it's tension. And this one is it's also tension, but this one is a steel guitar. And this one is a nylon guitar. So those are the, with nylon, that means the strings are nylon. And steel, I don't think it means that the strings are steel. I think it refers to either the body of the guitar or the pick is a metal pick. I could be wrong about that. But anyway, what Steve's done is layered both of those. So it looks like they're playing the same part all the way through, but they're doubled. So he's got two different channels with the same MIDI playing. He's got two different channels that have the same MIDI, but they have different presets on them. And that's a great move. Doubling things is a fantastic way to make things more interesting. Sometimes you pull in a preset and you're listening to it and you're like, this sounds bare. This sounds thin and flaccid. But if you have that playing and you have something else that's also playing the same thing, the combination of those two things can be much more interesting to your ear than either of them by themselves. Another way that you could do this is in Ableton. Another way that you can do this, so you can see right now there's just one chain on this channel that is the nylon, but you could drag more and more presets in here, and what's happening is the same MIDI is controlling different presets. Right? So you can also accomplish this on one single channel. But you don't have to. You could do it on two. And oftentimes it's more flexible to do it on two. All right, so we need to see how this is measuring up to the others. And I want these to be a little louder. Right, because this, by the way, this bass pattern is, I think, called an Alberti bass. Actually, Alberti tends to be like a doon dun 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 boom dun 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 boom dun dun dun. This is a little bit different because it's boom dun dun boom dun dun boom dun dun. So I don't know if it's technically still an Alberti bass, but anyway, these two tracks up here are laying just a foundation. They don't need to command too much of your attention. You just need to know that they're there. However, these guitar parts, if they're too low, it's going to sound empty because they should be commanding some of your attention. So I want these guys to be louder, and I want these guys to just play their part, but I don't want them to be a main melody. And I am hearing that these two guys are a little dry, so sometime before we're done, I think I want to add some more reverb to this. By the way, Steve has got a reverb send down here. He's got a delay send, and then this one just says return, so that's not doing anything. So I'm going to delete that. So Steve has 2 sends down here, and these are the default Ableton send. 1 reverb, 1 delay. I'm not sure. Steve may have done a little adjusting to these guys. I'm not sure. But anyway, these little guys right here, this is how you decide how much of that to send to the send. Okay? So for instance, with guitar, I could choose to send just this guitar to the reverb. I could send just this guitar to the reverb, or I could send this whole group. So let's see what we want to do. Before I do that, let me check the automation here. I'm going to re-enable the automation, but I'm going to drag it all down to about here. So we're still using Steve's automation, but instead of it being here going like this, it's going to be down here going like this. And you know, I think it's good to use whatever Steve put in, because he put this in here for a reason. Like, I have to suspect that the song has kind of a crescendo in this area, right where we see the volume go up and up and up, and then when it drops down, I have to suspect that there's a reason for that. But let's add a little bit of reverb. And there already is a little bit of reverb, but so you hear how dry it is without any reverb, and then with the reverb. And I think I like it better with a ton of reverb like that. A lot of times you wouldn't want to send it 100%. When this says 0, that's going from minus infinity up to 0. So 0 is actually 100%. A lot of times you wouldn't want to send it 100%. You really just want to be able to hear it, but you don't want it to be overbearing. For me, having it at 0 is not overbearing. I think it sounds good. But I think I do want to go into reverb and cut off some of the high end before it gets there. By the way, you can do this right here, low cut and high cut, but personally, I like the control. I like having it split into 2 different presets. So what you can do is just basically apply a high cut filter or a low pass filter to this chain before it hits the reverb. Okay. So I don't know if you guys can hear that, but when this is off, so when we're sending everything, the entire frequency spectrum, there's a little bit of what is the word I'm looking for? So when we send everything to this reverb, the entire frequency spectrum, it's a little too present. So listen to the very high end here. And it kind of smears a little bit. So I like the amount of reverb, I just don't like the amount of high end in the reverb. So I'm going to add a low pass filter with a crossover about 3K. So now the reverb is mainly mids instead of high end. And I can even, let me go ahead and solo this. So let's listen. So there's that. Let me get out of here so I can make sure that you guys can hear this. Let me close that. Okay, so there's the reverb when we send everything. Right? So we're getting a reverb signal that has much more of a focus on the mids rather than the highs. And that's really what we're looking for, because having too many highs in your reverb can really just make things sound smeary and a little too bright, a little too present, I guess. And I really like that. So I think we're going to say that the guitar is good, so we can keep it moving. He's got a little saturation on the guitar. Love it. Love it, love it. Okay, so guitar is done, bass is done, and the bass piano is done. Now the last thing that comes in at this part is called Neptune is Cloudy, which I recognize that name, but I don't remember what it is. Okay, so we got a little like texture going on. So when I was taking guitar lessons, my guitar teacher kind of split things empirically for me. So he told me there are chords, right, which is just people playing a bunch of notes at the same time. They're playing chords, or harmony is another way of talking about that, when you play notes at the same time, which clue people into what the chord progression is. So you've got that down here, and then you've got a melody line up here, which is just really linear. So basically one note at a time, and it's supposed to form like a contour on top, right? And that's basically the basis of music. However, something that's really important is having something in the middle that he called texture. So there's harmony, which is chords on the bottom, and then there's a melody on top, which is what we have right now. But now that we have Neptune is Cloudy in here, we've got a third thing which kind of sits somewhere in the middle. It's not really chords and it's not really melody, but it is filling out the space, and I call that texture. Thanks, Keith. And my first inclination is to think that this is going to be too quiet compared to everything else. So let's listen to it in the mix. I do think that Neptune is Cloudy should come up a little bit, not too much. We don't want to fill things out too much and make it bloated, but I do think we want to hear it even more than we do already. And I think that it's taking up a little too much of the low end. I think it's stepping on the bass's toes a little bit. So let's listen to just these two. There's a little bit of masking going on. So Neptune is Cloudy has some of the same frequencies that the bass frequency, or that the bass guitar has. So we don't want to pull too much low end out of it, but I do think we want it to back off of the low end so that the bass stands on its own in that frequency range. So instead of it being cut off at, I think it was at like 200, we're just going to bring that up to like 319 is what I had. Let's do a little bit more. Okay. Let's listen in the mix again. So this is everything that we've got so far, which are 4 different elements. And I actually don't think that that guitar needs to be as loud as it is. So the thing is, this guitar is really bright. So we definitely don't need to bring it up as loud as we might need to bring other things up that are not as bright. Our ears are particularly sensitive to high frequency sound, so when it comes to really bright stuff like this, you gotta be careful. And same kind of thing. I feel like the Neptune is cloudy patch here is actually also stepping on the toes of the guitar, and it's almost playing like a melody roll, and I don't think it should be. So I'm going to drop that from 2.5K to maybe 1.5K. So what we've got here is a band pass filter. So we're cutting out low end, we're cutting out high end, and we're just letting this band through. That's called a band pass filter. And I'm going to try something quick here. I'm going to add a sidechain compressor to Neptune is Cloudy. So it's going to listen to the bass, and every time the bass plays, it's going to drop the volume of Neptune is Cloudy just momentarily. And gosh, I'm gonna be honest. I feel like I just want this guitar to be like a straight. Yeah. I feel like I want the guitar to have a static volume, but we're gonna leave it for now. But I do feel like maybe the best move is to just delete the automation and then have it do something like, okay, here it's that volume, but then over here it's this volume. You know, just real simple, 2 breakpoints, rather than something like this. You know, because the more details that you add, the more effort it takes from you to actually parse all of this and be like, well, should this be at minus 26.057 or should it be at, you know, minus 24.057 or whatever. So a lot of times a way to save yourself some effort and just keep it moving is to have just 2 breakpoints, just like that. All right, this section needs to be about 5 dB louder than this section back here. And that can be a lot easier to parse than something like this. You know, it depends on how you like to work, but the way that I like to work is having something like this, just something real simple. Because it's easier to make decisions based on something really simple like that than something a little more complicated. Because when I see this, I don't really want to adjust anything. And you don't want to get into that mode where you're like, well, I feel like I had it perfect, so if I touch anything, what if I mess it up? That might be an indicator that things are a little too complex. But, you know, that could just be my workflow. So. And honestly, I'm going to do that. I'm just going to send it. If we need to automate it a little later, we can definitely do that. But I think a static volume is what's going to work best for this guitar. All right, so now we've got these 4 elements. And by the way, right now what we're doing is basically just leveling. By the way, what we're doing right now is basically just leveling. We're doing a little bit of EQ, maybe a little bit of reverb, some delay, that kind of thing, but essentially what we're doing right now is just making sure that the level is balanced for everything, okay? And leveling, in my opinion, is like 80% of mixing. And then the final 20%, yeah, delay, EQ, reverb, distortion or saturation. But in general, the very biggest thing that's going to affect your mix is just turning things up and turning things down. So start with that. Really focus on leveling before you get into the weeds with anything else. Because you might hear something and you're like, is that have too much high end? And then you start EQing and then you're like, well, gosh, now I feel like there's not enough high end. But a lot of times what the issue is that it was just too loud. Like, just bring it down 3 dB and it'll sound perfect, you know? All right, so now we've got a piano idea here, which, by the way, on this Neptune is cloudy. We can A/B it, so let me grab all this, group it. So without any processing, Neptune is cloudy sounds like this. Whoops. But then Steve added a color limiter right here, it looks like. Or is that glue? No, that's color. Okay, so that's where the dynamics are coming from. And then we've got this bandpass. So clean it up just a little bit. And then we've got a compressor right here. Which is just evening out some of the peaks. You can see, like, it's basically just riding it so that everything on the output is just more even. So rather than it being all spiky and wiggly, what comes out of the compressor is just kind of nice and even. Okay. So now we've got this piano idea. Oh, okay, so this is the other half of this bass piano up here that we split into 2 earlier. By the way, I don't know what the term is for splitting that. Maybe it's just splitting it. I don't know. But if you call it something, let me know. Because I've been struggling to figure out what the actual best term is to describe it. So that's a little quiet. Let's make sure that it can compete with everything else that's already playing. And I don't think I'm liking the preset there. I don't think it's matching. I think it sounds okay when it's playing, and then when it stops playing, it leaves too big of a gap. So we need something a little less impactful. Or we could just disable the delay. And what is this one? Well, that's it. Yeah, I want something different. I think that's the one. All right. So we've got a Rhodes thing here. It's called vaguely Rhodes-ish. I would disagree. I think it's very Rhodes-ish. Okay, so you hear how there's less delay, less reverb, so now it doesn't leave such a gap when it comes out. I think that's good. And then this is really dry, so I think I want to add some reverb here. Not quite all the way. And just out of curiosity, so here we can ask the question, do we want it to stick out a lot? In which case we would maybe put it up an octave. Because here's the thing, if we put it up an octave, now it's taking up some space that nothing else is taking up. So this guy becomes like a key player. But down here, it's taking up space that other things are already taking up. So that is nice because it sits well with, it sits better, it doesn't stick out so much. But that can also be a downside. If we want it to stick out, that can be a downside. But I think that sounds good right there. Let's do... Alright, so that's doing the same thing. It looks like these two are kind of the same part. Looks like, yeah. I believe so. Okay, I like those two things together. I think I might want to compress them as a group though, so let's group them. Yeah, and then I want to basically just like, so if it comes up this high every time it plays, I actually just want it to come up about this high, about half of where it's at. And then since we're bringing the volume down, using the compressor, the overall volume is now about half of where it was. Now we can bring everything up. I think that sounds good. So that's kind of the reggae. I don't know. It's a little fast to be reggae dance hall. This is just like syncopated piano. We'll call it syncopated piano. All right, let's bring in hats next, right? Let me look back at this. Yeah, let's bring in, I think we're just going to do this in order. Let's do percussion next, so hi-hats, kick, and then cumbia percussion. And then we're going to have two leads down here, and then we can finish out with these two guys, and yeah, we'll see what it sounds like. So hi-hats come in right here, right there. Okay. I like it, but I think it needs to come up a little bit, but even more than that, I think it needs a little compression to give it more of a, like a healthy volume. will say this EQ is not really doing anything because I think it sounds about the same whether we've got that high pass filter or not. This guy right here, I think it sounds about the same. I might hear like a tiny difference, but this is like 125 hertz, which is, there's not really much of that in a hi-hat. And we've got another auto filter here, so I'm just going to add a compressor so we can look at this. Okay, so what I actually want to do, I'm just going to loop this right here. So what I want to do is drop this into like this territory. You see how spiky it is? That's not a bad thing, but look at where the solid part is. I don't know if you guys can see this. So where my mouse is, everything below my mouse is solid, and everything above it is spiky. So what I want is the stuff below my mouse to come up, but in order to do that, we need to bring everything above my mouse down. Does that make sense? Right, so the way that we do that, first we need to lower the threshold so that it's actually biting into our track here, our hi-hat. Okay, this line up here shows how much we're reducing the volume. And this number down here is the same thing. So we're taking off about a 1 dB. I'm looking for about 2 or 3. I like that. Let's A/B it. So this is compressor off. Alright, you hear how the volume is much tamer now? So here, it's pretty live, it's a little unreliable how loud it gets between the loud part and the quiet parts. So when we add the compressor, it's a little more reliable. And then as a result, since it's more reliable, now we can actually start adding output gain. And then if we add one more compressor, this isn't actually to do anything. This is actually just to look at what was happening before and what it looks like now. Let's actually adjust this more. I'm going to bring the ratio up. And we could add a secondary compressor here, so let's drop this. Alright, so you see the solid part? Over here, the solid part was below my mouse there. But now we've got the solid part here. So it's just a little healthier. Let's A/B this so we can hear what's going on. So here it is before. And here it is after. Before. after. It's just a healthier sound. The volume, it's slightly louder, but it's not really the volume that we are hearing. It doesn't sound that much louder. It's like the quality of the sound is different. It's a little bit louder, but we're not really looking to make it louder. We're looking for the quality to change. So here it is, a little weak, I guess. And I like that better because you can hear the much better. You can hear some of the, I think there's some reverb on there. We can actually send this to a little bit of reverb. Actually, you know what? I think it's fine without it. So hopefully you hear the difference there. All right, and we're gonna call. We're almost gonna call that good. One thing I want to do though. Where is it? Here we go. Where's that coming from? Let me hear it without this. Okay, so I need to go in and pull this apart. We've got, I think it's actually the reverb that is making it sound a little strange. You hear when I stop it, there's kind of that decay. I think that decay is just a little bit too long. So we could turn the size up. That would kind of fix what we're trying to do, but I think what would be better is probably to just change the reverb decay, which looks like we need to do that over here, reverb time. Okay, so with no reverb, or with like half a second of reverb, sounds like that. And this is where we were at, 9:16, so about a second. So if we turn that down to like half a second instead of almost a second, I think I like that a lot better. And I think I'm gonna drop the volume just a hair here. Okay, and let's not loop it. This is great call and response. You can see pretty clearly the syncopated piano and the hi-hats and the kick, which we haven't brought in yet. Those all happen for a bar, and then when those all drop out, then this thing comes in. And then once this thing drops out, those other three things come back in, etc. Right? And that's called call and response. That's a great arrangement technique. Because if you think about like everything just keeps coming in. We just have more and more and more and more stuff coming in, and nothing ever drops out. It gets really overwhelming. So let's bring the kick in next, which sounds like this. Oh, that starts at the start of the song, so let's hear what that sounds like. Another thing, this kick is panned a little bit to the right. I'm going to drop that to the center, just because that's just, again, that's like a rule of thumb. So having it in the center, in my opinion, is important because the kick plays such an integral role that you don't really want it to be over there or over there. you want it to be in both at the same time. So in my opinion, I think the kick should be centered. All right, so I like that. I think this syncopated piano needs to actually come down a little bit. And again, as we start bringing more and more things in, we can change our mind about where things need to be at. Because like where the hi-hats sounded good a second ago, now that we're bringing more and more things in, it might end up happening that the hi-hat is just too loud compared to everything else. It sounded okay before, now it needs to come down. So that's fine. We can definitely change our mind. But this kick, I think it's at a good volume. I like it. Another thing, just again, I want to point out, since we have a bandpass filter on this kick, we just got to be sure that we don't really want any of this high end up here. Because for instance, if I disable this, let's listen. Let's do it over here. So there it is with basically all the frequencies, but Steve has got it so that we're cutting everything above like 200 hertz, which is a very distinct change in the sound. So all I'm saying is we just want to make sure that that's the way that we want it, and that we're, if at some point we're listening to the song and we're like, man, that kick is just not loud enough. It could be because we need to turn it up, but it could also be because we pulled a ton of the high end out. So it's harder to hear. So since it's harder to hear, we think we need to turn it up when really we need some of those high end to be back in there. And again, that's just assuming that we get to a point where we can't hear the kick so well. I'm not saying that we need all that in there. I'm just saying we got to be careful about taking all of that out. And like, I'm going to be honest, I think it sounds better with all of that high end in there. I think you can hear it way better. I think it sounds way healthier. Hi-hats I'm going to turn down just a little bit. And just to try this out, I'm going to group everything together, including the syncopated piano. So everything besides the hi-hats I'm going to group together, because I want to try to sidechain all of this to the kick drum here. So I'm going to have the sidechain listen to the kick, and then every time the kick comes in, everything that we've brought in so far, so like these 6 tracks here, all of that stuff is going to duck down just a little bit, and I think it's going to do 2 things. I think it's going to bring the kick forward a little bit more, which is important in this. This is like a cumbia style, so the kick is really important here. But yeah, so the kick is really important here. So we want to be sure that things are being brought out so that the kick can come forward and we can hear it particularly well. Not loud, but we want to hear it really well. So if we sidechain it, the kick is going to influence everything else and cause it to back out so that it can come forward. The other thing I think it's going to do is allow all of this stuff up here to dance a little bit more. So right now it's kind of making this real even bed, this real even foundation. But what I would like to hear happen is every time the kick comes in, that foundation drops out just a little bit, and then it comes back in. It's a nice foundation, comes out a little bit, so it makes it dance and groove a little bit. So we can see it, the kick down here. So I'm just going to drop this. And again, I'll do this. I like doing this just so it's really obvious what's happening. Right? So it's super exaggerated. I'm not suggesting that we keep it like that, but I just wanted to show what it sounds like really exaggerated. So now let's dial it back so that it's still doing that thing, but it's not nearly so obvious. And I want to hear it up here. So we can see it's bringing out about 3.5 dB every time the kick plays. And the thing I like is that it's not super noticeable. Like, it happens fast enough that you can tell something's happening, but it's not like it was before where it's just super, right? So you may not be able to hear it, but here it is without the sidechain. Here it is with the sidechain. Okay, and I like that. Let's move on. So next is cumbia percussion, which sounds like this. Love it. Let me check the automation on this really quick. I'm gonna assume, yeah, let's just drag all this down to like roughly there. Okay. That's what I'm talking about, this call and response. So cumbia percussion plays, then everything comes in, stuff drops out, so the cumbia percussion, I think those are bongos. Yeah, and honestly, I think that we could do without the automation here. I think it should just probably, we can find a good spot for it, and I think it'll be a great spot for it throughout the song. So one thing we might want to do is to pull down these resonances a little bit so we can see we got some spikes, like this one right here, and that sounds like this. Right, so once we find where that is, we basically just reverse engineer it, so we just want to make it real tight. Okay, so we've really exaggerated it. Now let's just bring it down like this. Maybe a little too much. We're not trying to completely pull it out. You know, I used to think that that's what,
you were trying to do here, is just completely pull it out. But now that frequency is just completely missing. What we want to do is just pull it out like 2 dB maybe. Because we still want it there. Like, that's a part of the instrument. You're not trying to pull that out completely. You just don't want it to be so much louder than everything else. Another way of fixing this could be just like some compression. If we had like just something really exaggerated. So like infinity to 1, which is basically a limiter, and then like a -20 threshold. Then it's going to bring the spikes out of everything. But that's not exactly what we're looking for. This track right here needs to be, I think, really dynamic. That's one of the things that's really interesting about it, is that it's like quiet and then it's loud, and then it's quiet and then it's loud. For other tracks, for other channels, you don't want that. Like if the piano, for instance, was like quiet some parts and then loud and then quiet and then loud other parts, that might be an undesirable sound. But for this, I think it's desirable. I think we want that dynamic change. So it's quiet and loud, quiet and loud. And then we just wanted to pull that boom, boom, that frequency out a little bit, like 2 or 3 dB. Let's see what this sounds like with some reverb. Okay, so it sounds good soloed. I like that. Let's hear how it sounds in the mix though. Okay, so I think what I want to do is automate this so that there's a ton of reverb here and here, and maybe the first 2 as well, but then after that, the reverb drops down maybe about like 6 dB. So you can really hear it there. You can really hear it there. Actually, I think I want that to happen here. Back a little bit. Right there. And then we can just make it drop, I guess. It doesn't really matter, I don't think. So listen again. A lot of reverb. A lot of reverb. A lot of reverb. Much less reverb. Now it sounds much closer to your ear. So reverb has the effect, the psychological effect. The volume doesn't change, but it has the psychological effect of making it sound like it's over there. Even if the volume doesn't change, reverb can make it sound like it's happening elsewhere, farther away from you. So that's an important thing to remember, is even though the volume stays the same, the psychological effect it has when your ear hears reverb is that it's over there, right? So it's still over there. Now all of a sudden, it's pretty close to your ear. Right there, I think I might automate the reverb. And let's do not quite so dramatic. Let's have it drop down maybe like 4, 5 dB. automate the reverb right here so that we can actually hear it fade out or die out when the bongos stop playing. I might even go to the reverb here and adjust. Ooh, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to automate this, the high cut filter. I'm going to automate that so that right here at the end it is off. Okay, so see what that did down here. Right now, normally it's pulling all that high end out, but just for the last part of this bar, I'm going to make it not do that. Okay, and the reverb is cranked right here, so let's hear this. I think so. Let's give it a little more leadway. I think so. Now it looks like we've got the same arrangement happening here and here, so I could just duplicate this automation, but I don't think I'm going to. I think I'm actually going to leave this up so that the reverb is, yeah, so there's a little contrast. So the second time it plays, the reverb is always happening, and now over here, what if we just completely pulled the reverb out? Okay, so we got a mix of the dry and the wet here in the first one. In the second one, it's all wet, all reverb. And then finally, at the very end, there's no reverb at all. So it's going to bring everything real close, and it's going to feel right next to your ear. I think that sounds good. All right, let's keep it moving. Let's do these leads next. So we've got a brass and this trumpet, what used to be a trumpet when Steve sent it. Let's see. Where did that come from? Where's that coming from? It's just the... So I do like that, but I do think also that it would sound good if we kind of doubled this. It does look like it's already doubled. There's a sustain and a release, but I want to double it one more time and find a good brass preset here. Just to add a little bit of interest. Okay, so here it is before. But I want to add this guy. And something that might work well too. So right now you have Steve's got the chords, so the bass, or I'm sorry, the brass. What is that called? So Steve has the brass playing together here, but then the brass is also doing like some solo stuff. So what I might suggest, that I'm not going to do, but what I might suggest is like this up here is just the solo stuff. So something that might sound a little more natural is if we split this into two, so that we've got a brass part that's playing the chords, but then we've also got a brass part that is focusing on the solo stuff, the melody stuff. So something like this, where and then we would have one brass preset up here and one brass preset down here. So, you know, I'm not going to do that, but that could add to the natural sound of it. Okay, and then we like that. Alright, so here's the part that was a trumpet, I believe, but we changed it to like an electric piano sound. And now that I'm hearing it, I don't think that's what we want. Alright, so I think I'm going to use the same horn preset that we used here. It's just in a different register. And again, since this is so bright, we don't need to turn it up so loud. I think that'd be good. One thing that I would like to hear though is stuff like this. I think I want to hear this harmonized. So like that. We put a minor third on the bottom. We do that here. And, you know, like a trumpet can't play both those notes at the same time, but the idea is you're writing this for two different trumpets. So one trumpet is playing the upper part, one trumpet is playing the lower part, and then they come together to play those two notes right there. Or, you know, you could harmonize those as well. And then this. Could have this down here again. And you could double all those too. Those could be harmonized. I'm not going to go through and do the whole thing, but just as an example of what's possible. So let's go ahead and hear this lead section. Let's give it a little bit of reverb. We don't want to give it too much because it's a lead instrument. Again, psychologically, when you hear reverb, it just sounds over there, and you don't want your leads to be over there. You want them to be pretty close to you. So I think it would be good to maybe max out the reverb on the brass, the low brass, so like trombones, tubas, and like a bari sax, just depending what your instrumentation is. So since these guys are just doing harmony right here, we're going to max out the reverb there, but the trumpets, we don't want to max out the reverb because we want it to sound pretty present and close. But we can try it too. I think it's too big. I think the trumpets sound too far away. Okay, so here's the trumpets. A little bit of reverb, but not as much as the low brass. So here's what it would sound like maxed out. I think that's too much reverb on the leads there. I think that sounds cleaner. One thing that I do want to do is take all this. I want to transpose it down an octave, and then I'm going to turn this down so that there's just an under line or a lower trumpet line. Maybe it would be doubled by a trombone or something. I mean, that'd be pretty fast for a trombone to play, but it makes it sound a little fuller. So there it is versus this. And this, we can max out the reverb. Let's do that. I don't know. Some people might not like that harmonized note right there, but I think it's nice and crunchy. I like it. I can come up a little bit. I guess the fact that the reverb is maxed out there, we could keep it at the same volume, but again, psychologically, that reverb is going to make it sound like it's farther away. Or, you know, another thing that we could do is actually make this sound more like a low brass and add a low pass filter. And then, of course, since we're taking out the high end frequencies, we can bump the volume. Let's hear how these sound. So again, this is what it was before. Alright, let's hear it in the mix. Turn all of these down by the same amount. Maybe like right there. Alright, yeah, I think that sounds good. Let's bring in these last two. We got a crash and a splash, so just two cymbals. So this crash starts right here. Let's bring that up. Maybe like that. It's going to be more obvious where it needs to be once we're over here. I think actually I want to turn that down. I might, to be honest with you, I might change it to a different crash sound. So a little sample selection work. Why is that? Where is that? It's just a little long for me, so we can fix that with a gate. So normally what a gate would do is it's like on or off, and then once it stops, once it goes below a certain point, it just mutes it, right? Well, that's not exactly what we're looking for, so we're going to turn the release up to maybe like half a second. Okay, you hear how much quicker it dies out? I think that's what we're looking for. And then of course we can bump the volume a little bit, maybe. Let's add some reverb too. And I think actually we might want to just pull some of the high end out of that. I think there just might be a little too much there. So we're going to use a shelf like this. To bring out like 5 dB of the high end. But as we get into this part part over here with the leads, we might want to bring that high end back in since it's busier. So the reverb has the effect of making it sound over there, like I said, but it also has the important effect of making it sound like it's actually happening in a space. So making it sound like a real instrument. All right, let's hear this in the mix. I think this, whatever's different about this right here, should happen right there too. So right here where everything comes in, I think that's where I'm going to automate this. That was right there. So this shelf that was pulling the high end out, I'm going to turn that off right here. So it's on, still on. Next time it's going to be off. So we bring more high end in, and it doesn't happen for a few bars. More high end. More high end, and then here it sounds like it's a different cymbal sample. I like that, but I think we need to bring the automate the volume. By the way, we can automate the channel volume here with show automation, but a lot of times what I like to do is actually just bring in a utility plugin and automate this instead. So that this is still static. There's no automation on this guy. We can still bring this up and down as a whole. Whereas if we had some automation, like turning it down for instance, now when we try to adjust the volume here, it's going to ignore the automation that we drew in, and we're going to have to re-enable it, which means we would need to drag it down, right? It's kind of a pain. So let's not automate the channel volume, let's just automate the utility here. So bring that down maybe like 5. I think that's good. And then this is going back to the other sample, so we can automate this back up. Yeah. I think so. I think I'm actually going to comp this. So comping is just compositing. That means I'm going to make a decision about which one of these belong and which don't. So I'm going to disable this second to last one right here. So it sounds like this. Okay. I think I like that better. Instead of having it play all 4 times, it happens 2 times. Doesn't happen that 3rd time, and then it does happen a 4th time right there. And let's make sure this sounds okay. Okay, so that's that second sample again. So this should drop down about 5. Actually, you know what? What a better way to do this would probably be, this is technical, but let's automate whether this utility plugin is actually on or not. So this is going to be fixed at -5, but let's draw this in. So from here to here, this should be on, which means normally it's off, but from here to here it's on. And where was the other one? Over here. So again, normally it's normally it's off, but right here it's going to be on, starting at this guy, like that. Okay, so now we can delete the automation here and just type in -5, and then what we're actually going to change is whether this utility plugin is on or off, not the amount that is being pulled away. Does that make sense? So instead of adjusting this guy, we're going to leave this right where it's at and just adjust whether this thing is on or off, and that's going to be a little cleaner. So off right now, and then it turns on. A little breakdown here. Then this is the old sample right here, so we need to turn this off right there. Okay. Sounds good. That's right. Okay, big finish there. I think the velocity is a little too much though. It's kind of sticking out from the rest of the song. Turn that down. I like that. And personally, I would put a crash right here. Oh, the splash is right there. Alright, I won't mess with that. Alright, let's bring the splash in, and that's it. The splash just happens in 2 spots. Start. Right there. Okay, and it's got some delay on it. Or echo. And actually, I noticed that nothing uses this delay send, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that. I don't think. I didn't see anything, I believe. Yeah, nothing uses that, so I'm going to delete it. And here's the splash. See how that sounds in the mix. A little louder, I think. Because, you know, the thing is, this only happens 2 times, at the start and the end, so it can be pretty loud. We don't have to worry about it throughout the song. Got that. I think I want to add some reverb to it though. I think so. That might be a little too like dance hall sound, but or dub. But I think it sounds great. I think it fits. I think that's it. So let's compare the original with our mix. Hopefully it sounds like there's some improvements. Really what we're trying to do with mixing is just make this song sound more like itself. We're not trying to do, you know, this isn't a remix necessarily. We're not trying to make it sound like my version of it. We're just trying to make it sound more like what's already there. We just want to clean it up. You know, it's like when you're cleaning house, it's not renovation. You're just making the house look better and more like itself without the dirt and the grime and stuff. So what I'm going to do here, every time that I solo this, we're going to be listening to the original version. When I unsolo it, we're going to be listening to the mixed version that we just did today. So let's give this a shot. Alright, we're going to start with it on. So again, when I unsolo this, Here's the new mix. Original. Here you can hear Steve's presets that he had, but I didn't. Sweet. Alright, so now what I want to do is just go ahead and record all this. I'm going to use resampling. So I just have a new audio track here. The input is set to resampling. I'm going to record enable it. I'm going to disable the, like, we won't actually be able to hear it. We just want to record what's happening into it. That's what resampling is doing. So I'm going to go back to the start of the song, and we're going to play it through so that we can watch the waveforms happen. And as we do that, we're going to adjust some of this just with a limiter. We're just going to use a limiter here. Cool. And so this might sound a little, or not sound, but it might look a little weak because of how small these audio waveforms are. And that's totally fine, because when we bounce this out and we choose to normalize it, it's going to bring everything up to about here. So once it does that, we can actually see that there are some discrepancies. There are some parts where, for instance, right in here, these waveforms don't really need to come up that high. What would be better is if we can chop some of this off, and then, well, let me show you. Alright, so now at these parts where it's jumping up a little bit, I adjusted the limiter so that it pulls about 3 to 6 dB out of it, and I'm going to re-record this so you can see what it looks like now. And that's basically the idea. So if we normalize this, we can bump this up until it hits the top of the clip, which would put it about here. We got about 17 dB we can add back in. But with this one, since we chopped some of the tops of the waveforms off, we have much more we can go. So we got about an additional 3 or 4 dB right there. And as a result, the volume difference between this part at the start and this part here is not so great as it was in this one without the limiter. So that's essentially what we're doing. You could go in and do some EQing. Steve actually already has a mastering chain right here, which I'm not going to mess with. I just want to do the limiting part of it. And that's about all I want to do. I think it sounds great. But I also think it sounded good when Steve sent it. So, great song with a good mix. Yeah, so I think this was a good session. I really like working on this cumbia style song. So thank you, Steve, for sending this, and also send more, Steve. I want to work on more, and send more, everybody. If you have stems that you want me to do a free mix on, you want us to do a free mix on, go ahead and let us know if we don't already have a Google Drive folder set up for you, and we can do a free mix on your tune next. All right. Peace out, everybody. Thanks for watching.